The United Nations says sexual violence is increasingly being used as a weapon of war in Sudan. Attacks have become widespread as the army and paramilitary rapid support forces battle for control. More than 130 cases have officially been reported, but rights activists say the real number is much higher. Ahmed Idris is in neighbouring Chad with Sudanese refugees who fled the conflict. Ahmed will come to you in a moment. First, though, let's go to Hiba Morgan in Khartoum. You've been working on this for a while, Hiba. Tell us what you've been finding out.
Well, we know that the cases that have been reported to governmental units here in the capital, Khartoum, and elsewhere around the country just represents the tip of the iceberg. That's what the unit has told us. That's what rights groups are saying. And they say that that's because of fear of repercussions. Now, many people, especially women, are still in conflict zones. They're still trapped in the fighting between the Sudanese army and the paramilitary rapid support forces here in the capital, Khartoum, and between their tribes and the militias and the RSF in other parts of the country, such as Darfur. So there are concerns, there are security concerns by those who have suffered sexual violence at the hands of armed groups, or rather, whether it's the paramilitary rapid support forces or militias. And so not many cases get reported, but the few that do get reported, there are always horror stories behind them.
Many people trapped in the conflict between Sudan's army and the paramilitary rapid support forces fear losing their lives to a stray bullet or artillery shelling. But for some women, another fear has surfaced: the threat of sexual violence.
We were going to pick up things from our home. There was a rapid support forces checkpoint on the road. They took us to a building. About 4 people carrying guns took me to a bedroom. They said, either you give in or we take your life. One pushed me on the bed, the other gripped my wrists, and a third was holding my legs. They took turns raping me. Afterwards, they told me to leave, but I couldn't walk.
The RSF commander was questioning me, asking if I was a spy, and I kept saying I was a civilian. Then he raped me at gunpoint. When he was done, he took me outside and threw me towards the men and said, "Threaten her with guns so she doesn't speak." They said, "Don't talk about this. If you do, we'll kill you."
Most survivors say their attackers were members of the rapid support forces. The paramilitary group is also accused of forcing women into sexual slavery in the western Darfur region. A government agency, the Unit for Combating Violence Against Women, has documented more than 130 cases of rape and sexual violence since the fighting began in April. While dozens of cases have been reported in conflict zones, the unit says that those do not reflect the real number of survivors of sexual abuse, and that shame and stigma are preventing many cases from being reported. Rights groups say sexual violence is being used to terrorize communities, and that some assaults appear to be racially motivated. The UN has called for accountability.
The parties to the conflict must take full responsibility for preventing any acts of sexual and gender-based violence committed by their members, and should issue command orders that prohibit sexual violence. Allegations of these crimes must be investigated, and perpetrators must be held accountable.
Rape as a weapon of war is not new. For decades, armed groups have been accused of violations in Darfur and other areas. To date, no one has been held accountable. Few believe this time will be different. Hiba Morgan, Al Jazeera, Khartoum. So people, especially women who are still trapped, still have the fear of reporting that they have been sexually abused or violated by their perpetrators. Now, we have spoken to doctors, rights groups also. They say that cases as young as 9 years old have been reported to be sexually assaulted by warring parties here, especially the paramilitary rapid support forces. It is worth noting that the rapid support forces has previously denied being involved in these allegations, but many survivors say that that is not true, and they say they want accountability, but as long as the fighting is ongoing and with no judicial or accountability mechanism in place, they doubt that they will be seeing any accountability anytime soon.
Hiba, thank you very much for bringing us those voices. That's Hiba Morgan reporting from Khartoum. Let me turn now to Ahmed Idris. You're in Adre in Chad, Ahmed, just near the Sudanese border. Hundreds of thousands of Sudanese refugees have fled to Chad. What have they shared about sexual violence in Sudan?
Shocking accounts, Cyril. I can tell you, shocking accounts. Yesterday, on Sunday, we met some of the victims, and it was quite a struggle for me to finish the interview. The account of one of the victims, a survivor, was so shocking that she couldn't even conclude the interview. She was crying throughout. First of all, this her account of a rape 4 months ago was not the first, and she was raped last year, just weeks before her wedding. And this year, too, she was targeted simply because her husband was an activist. And the account she was giving us was so harrowing that it was so difficult for us to even conduct the interview. And now doctors and health workers in these camps are telling us this is just a small fraction of the number. They suspect that thousands of cases are happening or have already happened, and simply because they notice depression and sexual violence, and of course rape is such a huge issue among communities here that many of the victims are not willing to talk about. Joining me to talk more about these cases is Dr. Faisal Abdurrahman, who himself was displaced by the latest violence in Darfur. He works at the General Hospital in Jazeera, and he heads the Women and Children unit of that hospital. He's been working as a volunteer doctor in these camps. Doctor, thank you for joining us. How widespread, what have you observed? How widespread is these cases? I mean, are these cases in camps like this?
There are hundreds and thousands of cases here in the camp, but because of cultural taboo, and even the victims, they feel that it's a shame to talk about such stuff, to tell family and even community you have been raped. They feel shame. That's why we don't have an accurate statistic. But I myself, I note a lot of cases, and when they suffered from mental problems, they will come and seek a medical care, and even they use it to suffer from medical problems. Not only sexual violence, they use it to suffer from such issues, and even other people's, because being survivor from armed conflict area, later it's gonna affect in your health.
Now, doctor, you're talking about giving them treatment. Do we have enough facilities? We're talking about more than 400,000 refugees in Eastern Chad alone. Do we have enough resources like counselors, like doctors, like medicines? Some of them have been damaged. For example, some of the cases we met, they are talking about infections, and it's so difficult for them to sort of relate this to doctors like you. Do we have enough facilities to deal with these cases? I mean, victims of sexual violence?
No, unfortunately, we don't have enough facilities, and even health personnel and even social worker to provide such services for them. But absolutely, they are in need of such services regarding psychological support, and even sometimes some of them, they are in need of a medical intervention. I myself and a colleague of mine, we were working on this, on Sudanese refugee camp clinic. We use it to provide health care for other people and even psychological support for such victims. But unfortunately, we have been stopped working because of absence of channel support for our camp clinic.
Thank you, Dr. Faisal Abdurrahman. Basically, what doctors and health workers are telling us here is that they could offer some help as long as they have these facilities to deal with such cases. But unfortunately, these cases, these facilities are not available. They were talking about people, women, young girls as young as 10, 13, 15, who have to run away back into N'Djamena, a danger zone, in order to run away from members of their families because of the shame they feel and, of course, the guilt they felt they were partly responsible. Sarah?
Ahmed Idris, thanks to you and your team for being in Adre to bring us this vital story, and thanks to your guest as well this hour. We appreciate it.